Christmas morning should have been filled with warmth, music, and the comfort of family. Instead, one cutting remark shattered the peace. "You are such a useless old woman," Melissa said, her tone sharp enough to silence the laughter around the table. I, Norma Wallace, 68 years old, rose from my chair, looked her directly in the eye, and replied with quiet firmness, "Then stop calling me when you need money." It was not the kind of moment anyone expects on Christmas Day. Yet in that instant, I realized that this holiday would not be like the others. My name is Norma, though most people call me Grandma Norma, and I thought I had seen every kind of family conflict possible in my lifetime. But I was wrong. That morning would change the way I saw my family, my role, and even myself. The day had begun with all the signs of a perfect celebration. My son, Daniel Harper, had invited me to his home in Portland. He and his wife, Melissa, had 2 children, and I adored Michael, 16, and Lily, 14. When I arrived, right at 10, as requested, the house was alive with the scent of pine and cinnamon. My famous peach cobbler rested carefully in my hands, a recipe loved by generations. Alongside it, I carried a bag of carefully chosen gifts from my grandchildren. Michael met me at the door, tall and trying to act grown up, but still grinning as he relieved me of the heavy dish. Lily raced across the living room, her arms wrapping around me in a hug that made the cold winter air fade from memory. For a brief moment, my heart felt full. Even Melissa greeted me with a practiced smile, saying how glad she was that I could join. We exchanged gifts, we laughed, and the morning carried on with the joyful noise of wrapping paper and children's excitement. It all seemed normal, almost too perfect. But beneath the surface, there were cracks forming, cracks that would widen before the day was done. And I had no idea just how deep they went. For the first few hours, the house felt alive with all the magic of Christmas. Daniel joked with Michael about his new video game console, Lily showed off her art supplies, and Melissa moved gracefully through the kitchen, humming along to the carols playing softly in the background. I joined her, as I often did, offering to help where I could. She asked me to slice vegetables, set the table, and make sure the drinks were ready. It was the kind of teamwork I used to imagine brought families closer together. But when the turkey came out of the oven and Melissa asked me to bring the desserts from the counter, my eyes fell on something unexpected. There were pies, cakes, and tarts, but no peach cobbler. My dish, the one I had carefully baked the day before, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's my cobbler?" I asked gently, glancing around the kitchen. Melissa's hands froze for just a second before she forced a smile. "Oh, that! I put it in the pantry. We already have so many desserts. And Daniel said store-bought is easier to serve and clean up." Her words stung like a bee sting. My peach cobbler was not just dessert. It was tradition. It was the same dish I had made for Michael's first Christmas, the same dish Lily once called her favorite. "I have been making that recipe for over 30 years, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It is Michael's favorite." Melissa shrugged, brushing the remark aside. People's tastes change, traditions change too. The dismissal was casual, but her tone made something twist inside me. "Melissa, I spent 3 hours yesterday preparing that cobbler. The least you could do is serve it." Her mask slipped then. 3 hours? 3 hours for something no one even asked for? This is exactly what I mean, Norma. You assume your presence is necessary. You assume we want your traditions. You assume we need you here at all. The clatter of silverware in the dining room seemed suddenly distant. I could hear Daniel laughing with the kids, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. My hands trembled as I studied the serving dish on the counter. "I brought dessert because that's what family does," I said softly. "I've been bringing dessert to family dinners since before you even met Daniel." Melissa stepped closer, her voice low but sharp as glass. "And what does that mean?" That I am not family because I'm married in? Let me tell you what family means, Norma. Family does not rearrange my refrigerator because she thinks we store things wrong. Family does not tell me how to parent my children. Family does not expect to be catered to just because she is old. The words landed like blows. I searched her face, trying to understand where this bitterness came from. I had never thought of myself as critical or controlling. To me, I was simply helping the way mothers and grandmothers do. But Melissa had been keeping score. Every suggestion, every small correction, every dollar I had offered in times of need, they had all been filed away as evidence against me. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to remind her of the times I had covered their mortgage when Daniel's job was uncertain, of the braces I had paid for so Michael would not hide his smile, of the summer camp I had covered so Lily could chase her dreams of painting. But before I could speak, Melissa cut me off again. The money. Norma, do you really think giving us money comes without strings? Every time you hand Daniel cash, every time you help, you remind us of it later. That's not kindness, that's control. Her eyes were cold, her voice steady, and in that moment, I realized she had been preparing for this confrontation. She had been waiting for the day she could put me in my place. The dinner table called us back with the sound of Daniel's cheerful voice. Melissa smoothed her expression, slipping into the perfect role of hostess once again. We carried the food into the dining room, but my hands felt heavy. I sat at the table across from her, the weight of her words still pressing against my chest. Michael chatted happily about his new game. Lily showed me a sketch she had been working on, and Daniel told a story about a coworker at the office. On the surface, everything looked like the picture of holiday joy. But every time Melissa's eyes met mine, I felt the message she had already delivered loud and clear. She wanted me gone. After dinner, the house bustled with the usual post-holiday chaos. Daniel took Michael to the garage to set up his new bike, and Lily skipped upstairs with her pile of gifts, humming happily. That left me alone in the kitchen with Melissa, just as she had clearly planned. She stacked plates with more force than necessary, her back stiff, her silence thick enough to choke on. Finally, she spoke. "I suppose you're proud of yourself?" Her words were sharp, thrown like daggers over her shoulder. I set down the serving dish I was carrying. "I don't know what you mean." "The little performance at dinner," she said coldly, turning to face me, "making me look bad in front of the children. Very mature, Norma." I took a slow breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Melissa, I wasn't performing. I was asking a simple question. I feel like there's something more here, or something I don't understand." Her laugh was bitter. "Oh, you understand just fine. What you don't want to admit is that this is my home, my family, my children, and I'm tired of pretending your constant interference is welcome." The words hit harder than I expected. "Interference? Daniel is my son. Michael and Lily are my grandchildren. I only want to help." "You call it help, but it's control. You give Daniel money not out of kindness, but because it keeps you relevant. You make suggestions about the kids not because you care, but because you think you know better than me. Every dollar, every word, it all comes with strings attached." I shook my head, stung by the accusation. "That's not true. I've never asked for anything in return." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "Haven't you? How many times have you reminded us that you paid for Michael's braces, or that you covered Lily's summer camp, or the mortgage when Daniel was between jobs? You keep a running tab in your head, Norma, whether you admit it or not." Her words silenced me, not because I agreed, but because some part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. I had mentioned those things before, never to manipulate, but sometimes out of hurt when my efforts went unnoticed. I thought I was sharing sacrifices, but maybe she heard them as debts. Melissa saw the hesitation and pressed harder. See, you can't deny it. You use your money to keep your place at our table. Without it, what would you be? Just an old woman with a dish of cobbler nobody asked for? Something inside me shifted. Then the sting of her cruelty gave way to something clearer, stronger. I looked her straight in the eye. If that's truly how you see me, Melissa, then maybe it's time I stopped giving you anything to resent. Her smile faltered just for a second, and in that moment, I understood this wasn't about desserts or refrigerators or parenting advice. This was about power, and Melissa was determined to have it all, even if it meant erasing me from the family. The tension between us lingered long after the plates were cleared. I tried to find the right words, something that might build a bridge instead of deepening the divide. But Melissa was not looking for peace. She wanted dominance, and she had no hesitation in showing it. Later that evening, just as I was preparing to leave, the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was not a neighbor or a friend. It was 2 uniformed police officers standing on the porch. Daniel looked confused as he opened the door, but Melissa stepped forward with practiced urgency. "Officers, thank you for coming," she said, her voice suddenly fragile, almost trembling. "It's about my mother-in-law. She threatened me. She said she would cut off all contact with the family, and she made statements that frightened me." I froze. Her words twisted the truth beyond recognition. One of the officers, a woman with a calm but firm demeanor, stepped forward toward me. "Ma'am, could we speak with you privately?" Daniel stared at me in disbelief. "Mom, what's going on?" I steadied myself and nodded to the officer. We moved into the living room and I explained in measured tones what had really happened. I told Melissa that if my role in this family is only financial, then perhaps we should treat it like a business arrangement. No more forced gatherings. If they need money, they can ask directly. That was all. The officer scribbled notes. "So you didn't make any threats of harm or violence?" "Of course not," I replied firmly. "All I said was that I won't continue funding a relationship that clearly isn't wanted." The officer's expression softened slightly. "That doesn't sound like a threat to me. It sounds like a family dispute over boundaries and money." Meanwhile, Melissa hovered in the hallway, pretending to be shaken, her hand pressed dramatically against her chest. Daniel stood between us, torn and silent. The officer closed her notebook. "We'll document the call, but we don't see cause for further action. Ms. Wallace, you're free to go." Melissa's plan had backfired, though she tried to hide her frustration. I gathered my things, including the untouched cobbler, and thanked the officers for their time. As they left, Daniel looked at me with worry etched on his face. "Mom, this is all a misunderstanding," he said quickly, clearly trying to smooth things over. But deep down, I could see the question in his eyes. Was this really just a misunderstanding, or had his wife drawn a line that could never be erased? As I walked out into the cold night air, one truth settled heavily in my chest. Melissa had gone too far. And for the first time in years, I knew something had to change. That night, back in my small apartment, I couldn't shake the image of Melissa standing in the doorway, playing the victim with police officers. The calm way she twisted the story, the way she nearly succeeded in turning Daniel against me. It gnawed at me long after I set my cobbler in the fridge, untouched. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and began writing. Not a grocery list, not plans for the week, but a tally of every time I had helped Daniel's family over the last 5 years. Mortgage payments, braces, summer camp fees, medical bills, cash slipped into Daniel's hand when he was short, gift cards I bought for the kids, but always passed through Melissa. When I added it all up, my pen stilled. More than $65,000. And yet somehow, I had become the problem. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something didn't add up. Daniel's job paid well enough. Their house was beautiful, their lifestyle comfortable. Why did they constantly seem to need help? And why, no matter how much I gave, did Melissa always act as though they were barely scraping by? Restless, I turned to my computer. Melissa had always been vague about her past, brushing off questions about where she went to college or the job she held before meeting Daniel. I had never thought much of it. People value privacy, after all. But now, with fresh eyes, it felt deliberate. It didn't take long before I found her maiden name, Melissa Carter, on an old wedding announcement Daniel's cousin had posted years ago. From there, I searched court records. My heart quickened when I came across a case from 2014. Melissa Carter, age 29, had been accused of embezzling funds from a small marketing firm where she was the office manager. The case never went to trial. It was settled quietly, but the details were damning. She had siphoned money from client accounts for nearly a year before she was caught. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight. Could it be the same Melissa? The age matched, the city matched, and the pattern, it was too familiar. The next morning, I went to the bank and requested copies of checks I had written to Daniel and Melissa. With my financial advisor's help, I went through my accounts line by line. The numbers painted a clearer picture than I wanted to see. My earlier tally had been conservative. In truth, I had provided over $67,000 in 5 years, not just to cover real emergencies, but also during months when Daniel's salary should have been more than enough. That afternoon, I drove through Daniel's neighborhood. I told myself it was only to drop off a forgotten gift, but instead, I parked across the street and watched. At 2:30, a delivery truck from a high-end furniture store pulled into their driveway. 2 men unloaded a dining set that looked like it belonged in a mansion, not a family supposedly living paycheck to paycheck. 30 minutes later, Melissa arrived home. She stepped out of her car with arms full of shopping bags from Nordstrom and other luxury stores. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails freshly polished. This, less than 24 hours after she told police she was under unbearable financial strain. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. All those years, I believed I was helping my son's family through tough times. In reality, I had been funding Melissa's private lifestyle, one that she carefully kept hidden behind a mask of struggle and sacrifice. And suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. Her resistance to my presence at holidays, her anger at my involvement with the children, her insistence on controlling every aspect of family life, it wasn't just dislike, it was strategy. I wasn't a guest in her home, I was an obstacle to be managed. And if my instincts were right, Melissa Carter, now Melissa Harper, wasn't just manipulative, she was dangerous. Once the truth began to take shape, I knew I couldn't confront Melissa directly. She was too skilled at twisting words, too quick to cast herself as the victim. If I accused her outright, she would only tighten her hold on Daniel and the children. I needed proof, evidence that could not be explained away. That proof came in the form of Detective Laura Bennett, a calm, sharp-eyed woman from the Financial Crimes Unit. I had reached out after confirming Melissa's embezzlement case. To my relief, the detective was already familiar with the name. Melissa Carter has surfaced in multiple investigations, she explained. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. She attaches herself to a financially stable family, drains resources, and moves on before anyone can stop her. The plan we crafted was simple but effective. I would offer Melissa something she couldn't resist, a large sum of money disguised as an early inheritance. The offer would be generous enough to trigger her greed, but structured in a way that forced her to reveal accounts Daniel didn't know existed. 3 days later, I called her directly. "Melissa, I've been thinking about our argument. You were right about some things. I have been too involved, and I want to make amends. Could we meet for coffee?" Her hesitation lasted only a moment before curiosity got the better of her. That afternoon, we sat across from each other in a quiet downtown cafe. She wore her best silk blouse, her hair styled to perfection, every inch of her prepared to win. "I want to give Daniel and the children a substantial gift," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a document prepared by Detective Bennett's team. $200,000. I want it handled properly for tax purposes, but for that, I'll need information on all your family's accounts, including personal ones used for household expenses. Melissa's eyes flickered with excitement, though she tried to mask it. "That's very generous, Norma. Daniel is so busy at work. I handle all our financial planning anyway, so it will be easier if you and I work directly together." I nodded, hiding the storm raging in my chest. Over the next 20 minutes, she listed account numbers and balances, not just joint accounts with Daniel, but 3 separate ones I had never heard of. She even mentioned a small consulting business in her name, though Daniel had never once spoken of it. Every word was recorded, every detail documented by the detective sitting just 2 tables away. As we stood to leave, Melissa placed a hand on mine, her smile warm and false. "This is exactly the fresh start our family needs, Norma. I knew we could work things out." I returned her smile, though mine carried a truth she couldn't yet see. The fresh start she imagined would not be hers. For once, Melissa had walked into a trap she couldn't control. And by the end of the week, her secrets would no longer be secrets at all. The call came early on Saturday morning. Daniel's voice shook as he tried to make sense of the chaos. "Mom, Melissa's been arrested. They said she's wanted in 3 states for fraud. They said she isn't even who he thought she was." His words tumbled out, stunned and broken. I sat quietly, letting him speak, knowing there was little comfort I could offer in that moment. Melissa's arrest was a public unmasking, but for Daniel, it was the collapse of the life he thought he knew. For Michael and Lily, it was confusion and heartbreak, but for me, it was clarity. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with a slice of peach cobbler, finally warmed and served the way it should be. I thought about the lessons hidden in those painful days. At 68, I had learned that love cannot be bought with sacrifice, and dignity should never be traded for approval. Melissa had tried to erase me, but in the end, she erased herself, and I had found my strength again. If you've ever faced someone who tried to silence your worth, remember this: your value is not measured by what others take from you, but by the courage you find to stand tall. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? Your voice matters.